My career sucks.
Sex just isn't the same.
What's my purpose?
Where did this fat come from?
My relationship is killing me.
I'll never be happy.
My debt is piling up. I'll never find love. Why can't I be like other gay guys? Hey guys, it's time to get a grip, stop whining, make a bold move, and do something amazing with your 40-plus gay life. Let's get to the show with your Tell It Like It Is host, Rick Clemons, who does his best to never act like a dick or a diva unless you act like one first.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of 40 Plus Gay Men Gay Talk. And boy, today are we going to do some talking about some stuff that, well, some of you are probably really interested in, others, and you're like, I don't see myself going there. That's okay. This is why we do lots of different episodes here on 40 Plus. But I want you to think about, what are you a slave to? What do you feel like you got some master taking over your world? And is it something you're enjoying? Maybe you're a slave to your job. Maybe you're a slave to a relationship that doesn't work. Or maybe you want to be a slave. Or maybe you want to be a master. Yes, we're going into the kink world, and we're going to talk to someone who is a confidence coach and a kink coach. We're also going to talk about how he helps people remove shame, not only in their world of what their sexual desires are, but how they want to show up in the world. And that's why he's a confidence coach, because so many of us gay men lack the confidence that we need to be who we are in the world, especially if we have these interesting kinks that we really want to explore and enjoy. So helping us unpack so much of this is a guy that, well, he's over in Berlin, and he's joining us today to talk about all this. His name is Philip Poole, and I can't wait to see, Philip, where we go in today's conversation. So thanks for being here, buddy.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. So interesting world you work in. I love, did it start with the confidence first? Was it the kink and the master slave stuff? Where did this all begin for you as a coach?
It was more the kink that I started with. I think it's because over such a long period of time, that's been such a big part of my life. And then about 7 years ago, I then set up a website where I wanted to help explain some of these issues. And part of that was, well, I want to link my work life with this, very interesting part of the world and life around power exchange. And bringing those together, and so it then turned into a natural progression to offer coaching as well as just education. And then later on, I started to realize some of the problems that I was noticing and helping with weren't necessarily to do with the kink scene, but with the gay community. And that's when I started to widen out.
Interesting. I think it's an interesting juxtaposition for sure, because it is, in so many ways, whether you're in a kink space of master slave or in the work environment or even in your own self as a gay man, it's a power exchange. I mean, we give away our power all the time as gay men and LGBTQ people in general, but as gay men, we give away our power all the time when we have shame around saying, I'm gay. Well, we just gave away the power. We gave the power to somebody who doesn't see us for who we are. So I'm just a little curious, like, when did your own identity start to realize I'm really into like this master slave kink sort of space? Was it a really young age? Was it after you've been out for a while? Tell us a little bit about that.
It's actually a really young age. So when I was 4 years old, I remember playing good gorilla and bad gorilla with a friend. And the bad gorilla would basically dominate and overpower the good gorilla. And that made me feel strange in a nice way. And as a 4-year-old, I can't, there wasn't any words other than there was something different. And then over time, those fantasies grew. And on the second day, I had the internet with AOL, for anyone that remembers that.
Yep.
I was doing some certain keyword searching and suddenly realized that I wasn't crazy. And there was actually this world of people that were actually having power exchange relationships and power exchange experiences. I then had to come out because I hadn't come out yet, because I was only 17, 18. But then a couple of years later, I very quickly started to engage in having a power exchange or master slave relationship. And so that's been one of the primary way I've had relationships throughout most of my life.
So what about the power exchange is something that really turned you on?
So I think part of it, of course, is in the fetish about giving the power up to someone. And especially when I was younger, just having someone that could take over and look after me. But I think there was also something a little deeper, which is something I've only realized recently, which was if I was being controlled by someone and they said that I was doing a good job, then I was okay and I didn't have any issues with myself. And
Mm-hmm.
so there was sort of a psychological, someone, giving that power to someone else to say whether I'm good or bad means I don't have to worry about that myself.
Mm-hmm.
But recently I'm now on the other side of the power exchange and take a dominant or master role, and I found that it's as fulfilling. But what's interesting, I think, about both sides was some of the key pulls for me was this idea of transformation, being molded, changed, or transforming or molding someone. And I should say this is all consensual. It's not like someone's forcing a change.
Mm-hmm.
And those sorts of kind of changes was something very, very powerful within me. And then the other thing that made this more of a relationship was that it wasn't just the sex. It was sort of something that my soul needed. I sometimes say that I often walk in the road and I feel like I'm slanted a little bit. And when I'm having a power exchange relationship with someone, I'm then centered. And so part of how I interact within the world, there's just part of me that needs this deeper power exchange to actually feel centered compared to someone that might want a more mainstream relationship.
But what you just shared is about bringing yourself into alignment with your truest self. That's what it
Exactly.
sounded like to me. And so many of us seek that alignment, and yet there's just being okay. Let's just go there. Just being gay is about seeking alignment, and then we get shamed for it, and then we wonder why the fuck we're all so fucked up, right? When if people would allow us to align with our truest self, if you don't not into kink or the fetish or anything, nobody's telling you have to be there. But if that works for someone else, let it be. And I think that's what you're sharing here is you found a way to align with your truest self so that you can be who you most want to be in your world.
Exactly. I think so many of us gay men, we have masks and we put on these masks
Yes.
to anyone we meet, and there's a different masks for a different people.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're always hiding or changing ourselves to be accepted rather than who should I be and can I be that in any place?
Mm-hmm.
Something that's really surprising is a lot of kink coaching I do. Sometimes people are actually already out on the kink scene. But what's happened is that they go out onto the kink scene, but still don't feel they can be themselves because every sub-tribe, including the kink scene, has certain norms, certain looks, certain things that people are saying. And as gay men, we're very good at knowing what those are very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And then we try and fit in. And
Yep.
then we find ourselves, well, I'm not being honest about myself still. And so
Mm-hmm.
we come out as gay men, we might come out as a kink man or even a master or slave, but we're still not actually coming out as who we want to be.
Well, Philip, think about this. How many of us, you know, I know this was my experience. How many of us feel shame if we want to be a bottom? There's a huge shaming that happens for guys that are like, I'm a bottom. Then, of course, there's those that like own it for all it's worth. But I remember the first time that I did bottom for a guy, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm this big strapping, 270-pound guy and look like a football player, all this stuff. And oh my gosh, I just let some guy fuck me. Oh my God, what's wrong with me? And I'm like, well, that's what I enjoyed. I'm not typically a bottom, but hey, that was enjoyable. But man, the mind fuck that I put myself through on that one was huge because it made me less of a man, so to speak. And I'm sure this happens in what you just described in the kink community all the time. It's like, oh, I feel this kink, but then, oh, I can't be it, or am I just being this kink because, oh, this is yet another way for me to feel like I fit in. I'm sure that
Yeah,
happens quite a bit, right?
definitely. I think there's kind of two things of that. The one is, being ashamed of being truthful about yourself in case you're going to be rejected. And that's something that I think a lot of gay men really struggle with. But then the other is that we're very conditioned around the society around us, and what has traditionally been a very patriarchal society. Men should be strong, dominant, and in charge.
Yeah.
Whether this is good or healthy, I'm not talking about, but that is what we're conditioned. So for a man to decide to be submissive or to submit or to bottom, there's something, well, am I actually a man if I do that?
Hmm. Yep.
I was actually speaking to someone today, and they actually said something quite interesting, which is you can still be a male, but you're no longer a man. And of
Mm.
course, this is bullshit. You're as much a man if you bottom or you submit. In fact, often more so because you have to have the courage to move forward and do that. There's more boundaries you're having to push through. But because of all of the messages we get from what we read, what we see, the people around us, and just marketing and our society in
Hmm.
general, it creates this internal shame that is not actually true. But yet the shame is very true for all of us when we experience it.
I also think it's interesting when the reverse shaming happens. So you're really super masculine. You want to, you're interested in cars. You want to build houses, or you're this. Oh, you can't be gay. You can't be gay. There's that flip too that I'm just like, really? Just because a guy is, I'm not even going to say, well, okay, maybe quote hyper masculine. I don't see it that way. I'm like, this is just what they enjoy doing, right? I have friends that are like, I would never step foot in a musical theater production, but man, they're damn good at building and crafting and working on cars and all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, I would never work on a car because I just don't want to do it, period. But there's this suddenly, like, back to what you just said, these masculine identities that we put on all this stuff. And then in the gay community, for a lot of guys, like a really super masculine guy, it's a really hot turn on. I'm one of those. I find a really super masculine guy like, ooh, yeah. But it's interesting to me. I'm going to kind of go back to something you said about these interesting ways we look at people to be accepted. And there were guys in my life who were people in positions of what I'm going to call authority, so to speak, guiding teachers and stuff like that. I molded myself to be exactly what I thought I needed to be for them. And then I got really upset when I didn't get what I wanted from them. And it took me a long time to unpack that one. And the whole thing was, most of the guys, there's two in particular that are in my mind right now, I was very sexually attracted to. One was a gay guy, one was not. But I realized I was molding myself to them in their guidance, helping me build my businesses and stuff, because there was this interesting attraction, almost mentor daddy fetish going on in my head, that if I just did what they wanted me to do, I'd get attention. And I would get attention, Philip. But then when it wasn't quite the attention I really wanted, and I'm not talking sexually, guys, I'm talking like just this, like, ooh, blessing, acceptance, I suddenly was like devastated. And I turned completely the other direction, like, fuck them. I don't want anything to do with them. And I think this happens a lot when people start to step in and explore, like in your world. They're going to go explore. And then when they don't get what they thought they were going to get, then they maybe freak out. I'm not in your world, so I'd love to see your commentary on this. Or they get really super confused and then they don't know what to do. I'm assuming that's another thing that happens as people step into the kink space.
Definitely. I think the one thing is that we don't quite know what we want until we start to have experiments with it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we want to be so absolutely sure before we do it. We can set up all of these expectations. And then when we try to go, well, that wasn't really what I expected. And sometimes we can be so nervous, or we set the expectations so high, nothing is going to be able to create that experience. But sometimes we can find, well, actually, that's not what I want. So I often say doing small experiments, trying small things, is a way of really building up your inner knowledge of what is it I really want. But then when you bring in, let's say, the power exchange part, I think there's a lot of us that are all looking for that sort of father figure we never had.
Mm-hmm.
And so when there's another gay man or even a straight man that's suddenly looking after us or taking a mentoring role, we can attach a lot of the needs that we thought we want from the father on to that person. And it's very unlikely that they're going to meet that because they're not having a father-son relationship with us. They're having a
Right.
different relationship. But on the other side, I think this idea of mentorship within the gay community is incredibly important, and that is something you can find a lot within the kink scene. But the phrasing I've always kind of used here is, I think rather than looking for fathers, we need to find a big brother. And it
I
kind of
love that.
breaks us out from some of that projection we might do to go, well, no, this person's not my father, but they're the big brother that I never had that can help me in moving forward or help me get out of the hole I'm in or help me learn this new amazing thing.
Mhm. What I find interesting about this, what you just said this whole time you were talking, is if we took the kink out of it, it's actually the baseline. Everything you just said is the baseline for helping gay men build confidence. It doesn't have to
Exactly.
have anything to do with kink. And I've seen it over and over again because so many gay men in my practice, it's interesting that I've never actually seen myself as like, oh, I'm kind of a confidence coach, but in reality, that's what I'm doing. Helping people come out of the closet is helping them build confidence to do it. Helping someone move out of a job that's causing them pain and suffering and they hate it is about having the confidence to move on. Helping somebody learn how to get out there and date. So I've kind of couched some of my stuff even in that world. But when you were talking about that first bit, and then when you switched into like the father brother, I think most of us need that brotherly figure, so to speak, to help us build the confidence we need in dating, in our careers, in our sexual desires, in our weight loss or, fitness. All of it is about having the confidence to go do it. And many gay men get stuck in, I don't have the confidence. They're not saying that word. I think you'd agree with me. They're not necessarily saying, I don't have the confidence, but they're saying, I can't do that because, or I can't do this. Is that what you find too when you're working with people in this confidence? Is like, it's really more at the core of, they're not saying it, but if they just could build the confidence, man, could they move freaking mountains?
Exactly. I often kind of see things of it's often that we're all trying to fit in with the people
Mhm.
around us and to move to who you really are and really act from that place of this is who I am. That is how you move into that confidence. And so you can simplify it to the phrase know thyself. And the
Mhm.
moment you can know who you really are and you start to act in an integrity towards that, then
But
you
don't you
become this
think,
amazing.
well, sorry to interrupt, but you said something here that I don't want to get missed. That integrity to know that is huge.
Yes, very much so.
Because if you can't latch onto that, and it's scary, because if you can't capture that piece, you can keep going. But as soon as you can latch onto that, I think that's where the big shift begins to happen.
I often talk about it like you're on the planet of trying to fit in, and then you're moving to the planet of this is me. And there's a certain point you might jump and you get between the two planets, and of course, you're weightless, there's nothing to hold on to. You're just adrift and lost, and it can be an incredibly frightening experience. But the moment you find that one thing to hold on
Mm-hmm.
to move you to the other place, it's kind of quite magical how quickly a person that I'm working with suddenly builds that confidence to go up and go, oh my God, yes, this is who I am. This is what I want. This is what I want to try.
But so many gay men have such a hard time saying what you just said. This is what I want. This is what I want to try. This is who I want to be. And it comes from all the shaming, I believe, that we've received as a culture. Like, you're not any good. You shouldn't be that, all that sort of stuff. I'm going to use
I,
myself as a quick example here because I feel like, not that everybody needs to know my stuff, but I would say I was pretty much a top for the bulk of my gay life so far. Bottom every once in a while. I have a interesting little kink around bottoming that it's got to be a certain type of guy. I like bottoming for younger guys. Now I'm 61, not that old, but I just love, my thing is I just love being naked with a guy, cuddling, holding, jerking off. I don't need to fuck. I don't need to be fucked. And I actually love that. But you know what? It was so scary, Philip, to finally be able to say that to my husband, to anyone that we have sexual experiences with. This is what I really enjoy. I was so ashamed because I felt like they're going to say, oh, well, because of his age, something doesn't work. No, the plumbing still works. It doesn't work as good as it used to, but it's still, I don't have erectile problems. Just the coming part isn't quite what it was. But man, it was so scary to go, if I say this, my husband's not going to enjoy sex with me any longer. But I felt so relieved when I finally said, yeah, I'm going to use the coined word side. I'm probably more of a side than anything these days. I love playing with cock. I love kissing. I love making out. I love touching the body. But I don't need to do the penetration thing either way. But man, was that scary to admit, man. And I think that's what your point is. We have such a hard time admitting these things. So I'm curious for you. Go ahead.
So I think there is a lot there that you talk about around, what I really enjoy, I can't say because I might be rejected.
Yep.
And I think as well as the shame, another layer that lots of gay men have is that we can get very disconnected with our joy. And so we might do a hobby or an interest that we really like, but because we really need to fit in or we need to find some way of, standing out or being validated and affirmed, we move away from what we enjoy to that thing. And so, for example, some of the clients that I work with, one loves sailing, but they always had to be in charge. And suddenly they're like, "Well, I'm just fed up of going sailing because I have to take charge." The question is, well, why do you? What do you actually enjoy? But we can get so fixed into how we need to fit in, how we need to get away from the shame we might feel. We don't even connect it to what is it I'm actually enjoying. That's not the important thing. And so because we never really focus on the joy or the actually truly important thing, it turns to such a habit that when we actually go to do that, like you were saying, you end up having this real fear of, oh, should I do this? I might get rejected. I think it's really important to note that if we weren't gay, if we were actually more heterosexual, we probably wouldn't have a big an issue with it. And it's part of the issue with our sexuality as when we grow up. We've learned this very weird way of connecting to our joy and trying to be ourselves that we then connect to rejection. Rather than actually going, I can be myself and suddenly have amazing fun or have the connection I always wanted.
I love what you just said, that connecting to rejection. I think we've become so accustomed to, okay, somebody's going to say no, so let's it's almost like let's go for no instead of going for the yes. And I also love the rejection of joy piece, because I think this is something as men in general, I'm going to bring in some of my heterosexual conversations here. I have some guys I'm pretty connected to that are, heterosexual men. And they really struggle with this being given permission to feel joy. Like if I show joy, then I'm too gay or something. And one of my buddies said, well, if I'm too joyful, I'm going to be like you. They're going to assume I'm gay. I'm like, well, I assumed you were gay just because of sometimes the way you act. And of course, you're like, really? I'm like, yeah, at first I was kind of like, I think you're, and then I found out he wasn't and all this sort of stuff. But what I find interesting is this connecting to joy and connecting the rejection piece. You kind of said this earlier. I want to make sure I heard what you said. Even in your own journey, as your kink journey has unfolded, I think I heard you say you kind of switched places from servant to master, right?
Exactly.
So was there that transition for you of like, I think you switched because you wanted to continue to experience some joy and pleasure. But I'm curious what happened for you as you started to make that switch in your own journey.
Well, we could actually widen it out because it wasn't just the switch from slave to master that happened. I actually went through a complete burnout. And
Mm,
one of the things which I realized I'd started to do was I was really connecting to the validation and not to what I actually needed. So, for instance, with my podcast, it was all around the figures. And there's nothing wrong with, having a healthy podcast figures, but I was connecting my self-worth to it. And I suddenly realized I had this huge perfectionist part of me, which comes from when I was young. I was bullied at school, bullied by my father. And so, what my young self thought was, if I'm perfect, if I don't make any mistakes, everyone will leave me alone. And suddenly I'm in this position of burnout that my health's failed. I can't do anything I want to. And so I really feel like I'm a failure as a man. And I really
mhm,
feel like I'm a failure as a person. And I was really shocked at all of the negativity that I was saying to myself. There was kind of this inner monologue about things like, well, you're so soft and weak.
mm,
This really harsh, critical part of me. And it really made me realize that I'm sort of looking at myself with a critical lens all of the time. Not you've done all of these amazing things, but this is all of the things you've done wrong. This is what you should improve next. And so, as I was going through this change to be a master, it was really strange because quite often, if you want to be a dominant, you want to be in charge. For me, it was like, well, should I be making mistakes? How can I say I'm going to be in charge of someone if I'm failing so much?
mhm,
And so, what kind of came out as part of this process was to really understand, is my power to do with what I achieve, or is my power to do with who I am as a person, and am I authentic?
mm,
Am I really being myself rather than connecting my self-worth to figures or kind of having a successful business or having muscles. It,
mhm,
it kind of like really it broke a lot of the illusions that I had around what I needed to be a good person, and to kind of then go, well, what is it I actually need? And so it actually made that slave to master a very confusing process as well, because I was going through this bigger change and really questioning my authority and power as a person as well. You don't know if I answered that
You
question
did.
correctly, but that
No,
was
you
that was
did.
my sort of transition.
Hmm. No, that's kind of what I was thinking was going on. There had to be something bigger than, okay, I'm going to quit being a slave. I'm going to be a master. There was a whole thing. And it's interesting as you talk through that. So, again, I'm going to say, guys, I'm going to invite you to like rewind right now and re-listen to what he just said, take the kink out of it. And every bit of it could be, well, I decided I didn't really want to go for that position, that higher position, or I wonder if I should be going for this higher position at work because, I've always been here. And it's the same conversation. We just happen to put it in to Philip's world of slave master, but every one of us is doing this. We're doing it in our relationships. We're doing it in our careers. We're doing it in our how we look at our bodies. We are doing this juxtaposition back and forth, and then we feel the shame when we wonder what we should be doing in all this. It's all more at our core. It just happened to be manifested for you, Philip, in your master slave kink fetish. But the beauty of what you just shared was this is a perfect example of how it's about aligning with you at your core and really seeing yourself in a beautiful way. So how do you feel now that and maybe you're still working on it? How do you feel now that you've transitioned into, okay, this is how I see myself in the kink world as a master versus a slave?
I'd say it's still something I'm getting used to. So,
Mm,
for instance, I've rather than keeping it a little hidden about I was doing this change, I've now been much more open. But when I have someone turn around and go, "Well, hi, Master Phil, how are you?" It still throws me a bit to
mm,
be
mm-hmm.
to be referred to as Master Phil rather than Slave Phil. And it's a
Interesting.
really weird thing, and it shows that I'm still moving into a zone of being comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I've sort of broken out of, let's say, some of the darkness. I mean, there's
Yep.
still some darkness still there that I'm working with, But the fact I can, let's say, be out and talking about it and be out and realizing where some of my struggles are about how I should not see myself, such as the self-criticism, and I
Mhm.
need to move to a more, let's say, self-appreciation view of myself. But I'm still, moving to a landing. And I'm
Mhm.
sure once I reach that landing point, I'll realize that it's just a camp like going up the
Mhm.
Himalayas, and there's actually going to be another kind of journey after that as well.
As you were talking through that, and this is a very weird correlation, but it's really fresh for me. I notice guys, I said had another podcast called Life Uncloseted. It is the original podcast. It was 10 years ago. It started 600 and I don't know, 41 episodes. And about 6 months ago, I started thinking about, I don't know if I want to keep going. I loved the podcast, loved it dearly, it was my baby, but I started kind of doing it in my own weird way. I feel like I'm a slave to this podcast. I want to be more of a master of what I'm doing out there in the world. And then 40 plus, the one that we're recording here, became popular. Like you, I'm like, oh God, for a while I got tied to the numbers and the downloads. I'm like, it just is what it is. I'm gonna let it just organically be what it is. But Life Uncloseted was like, I don't know if I want to let it go. Ego gets in the way. Like, oh, should I really do this? And when I finally made the decision to wrap it up, which it only wrapped up in mid-October, folks. So if you want to listen to the final episode, which is really powerful, I would encourage you to kind of go back and listen to it. I did it with a really good friend of mine. I had such a sense of relief of alignment. Like I did this because this is what I needed to do for me. Do I miss it? Sure. Of course, as soon as I decided to do this, I started getting lots of people wanting to be on the show, right? I'm like, okay, here's the test. Are you really going to follow through with this, right? I was in my own weird master slave situation with that podcast. Loved it dearly, still do. But I realized I needed to make a shift. And that shift helped me better align with what do I want to be doing right now in my world? And I feel like this entire conversation we've been having, Philip, is about that. What do you need and desire to be aligned in your world? Whether it's about your kink fetish, whether it's about your career, your body, whatever it might be. And all that comes from the stuff that Philip does a really good job doing of helping you build the confidence to build your alignment. I think that's at the core of this discussion. Does that feel pretty accurate?
Very much so. I'm a sci-fi fan, so I sometimes kind of say that sometimes what to try and do here is align ourselves by saying, "Who am I?"
Mm,
And if you can answer that question, you can then answer the question, "What do I want?" And then if you
mm,
can answer that question, you can then go to what are the people that I should be with? And if you can answer that question, you could also answer about purpose.
mm.
And so they all build on each other. And so having that alignment to yourself then allows you to really focus on the energy you're in and allow that emerging future of who you should really be and who you want to move to happen. And the
That's
reason why
really
I
strong.
mentioned this this was a sci-fi, it's based on some questions from Babylon 5. And when I kind of went through it, I suddenly realized that it's really talking around your identity and who you are if you move into alignment with yourself.
Mhm. But you can't do it without confidence and without releasing shame. And I know you have a shame guidebook that you talk about. So let's talk about that real quick before we wrap everything up. Give us some insight, like what guys get if they work with that shame handbook.
Yeah, so within the work I've been doing around just helping gay men with confidence in general, and then especially with kink shame, was that it is this huge thing. And I think the more Puritan the culture you come from, or the more Puritan your background, the more this shame is. And it can really stop us from opening ourselves up
Mm-hmm.
in terms of being a bottom, such as what Mimi said. But there's very little help around this. And especially as gay men, how we interact with shame is very different to other sexualities.
Yes.
And so what I kind of did was I researched what people are saying about shame and how you can move through it with male shame, women shame, and gay
Mm,
shame, and brought all that together and then reconfigured it in a way that works best for the gay man. And
nice.
then there's kind of like four main sections, and you kind of move along them, and it allows you to really identify how, as a gay man, you might be hiding from shame or going into shame, and then how you can build resilience to kind of stop it, or in some cases, transform it into something you're proud of.
That sounds amazing. Really cool. So if somebody wanted to work with that, how could they work with you on that?
So if you go to courage2.b
Hmm.
slash book,
Okay.
and there will be a link there for it. And I'm also doing a kink variation of it as well. So if you're more interested in kink shame, go to masterslavelifestyle.com/shame. And that will
Cool.
lead you to one that's a bit more custom for kink.
Very cool. And that's
Um,
where they can find the podcast too, is masterslaveflifestyle.com, right?
exactly.
Very cool.
And that's where they can find all of the other information about me as well. So if you're interested in something else, you'll find it there.
Very cool. And guys, we're going to have all those links on the website. So if you really want to get in touch with Philip, I'd highly recommend it. I mean, I'd love to say I can coach everybody through this, but I only got so much time, and I love the variations that Phil's bringing to this, especially in the kink space. I'm not a kink guy, so to speak. I'll leave it at that. Which is almost a statement of shame there. I don't need to talk about my kink stuff because I'm not really into it, but there's things that I like that are kind of interesting at times. But I also feel like this is a beautiful opportunity. If you are a guy that, after listening to this discussion, which again, Philip, thank you so much. I loved what we covered today. But if you're a guy who's really struggling, even with the confidence to say, I want to go for that promotion, but I don't think I can. You need to start building some confidence and letting go of some shame, because there's shame built in there somewhere by somebody, by the way you've been conditioned in our world to believe that you're not worthy of even going for the promotion. And I'd invite you to work with a confidence coach like Phil to really help you break through this stuff. So before we wrap up, Philip, what's one of the things that you feel either most proud of or most alive because you've allowed like yourself to be who you want to be? What's one of the things that really just lights you up knowing you've stepped into this space?
I think it's actually how I help other people to also
Mm,
do it as well. And especially during my dark spot this year, there was one person that came up to me at a conference and said, "You have no idea how much you help me and others in the fact that you communicate and talk around your own experience." And I'd really lost touch with that. And it
mm,
made me realize that that's actually one of the key things for me. It's around by being myself, I can help others be themselves. Because I
mm.
think a world where everyone can just be who they're meant to be is a happier.
Much happier
It's
place.
I was going to say healthy, but in some ways, yeah, healthy comes with it. But it's just everyone's just happier if you can be yourself and really live who you are supposed to be.
It's interesting that you brought the happy and healthier up, because I was working with one of my other clients so I coach, most guys know, I coach people helping build their speaking businesses. And we got into this subject because they happen to be a health coach. And I said, so do you think happiness is a byproduct of being healthy, or is healthy a byproduct of being happy? And she said, I think it's both. If you're happy, you're probably healthy. But if you're healthy, you're probably happy. So it's just ironic that we kind of landed here at the end of this podcast to really bring that forward. And I think what we've talked about, again, could be seen in both ways. If you're happy and healthy about your kink, happy and healthy about your confidence, you're healthy and happy about your confidence in your kink. It works both ways.
I
Philip, thank
completely
you so
agree with
much.
that.
Thank you, sir, so much for being here and sharing yourself and giving us some insights. And guys, you know what? You can have your kink and you can be so amazing out in the world. It just comes down to being aligned with what you desire and who you most want to be. And I love those last questions you threw, like, well, who am I? What do I want? And who are the people I want to be with? Because that's going to help you get where you're trying to go, guys. So again, Philip, thank you for taking time out of your day and really your evening. He's coming in from Berlin, so it's already evening where he is, but thanks for being part of our world and helping us be better guys over 40 in our gay life. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you.
That's a wrap for 40 Plus. Gay men, gay talk, where size doesn't matter. We drop our bullshit, get over our screwed up fears, make bold moves, and live life without apologies. Don't forget to join us on Facebook at 40 Plus, Gay Men, Gay Talk, where the conversations continue.